All right, let's dive into a really powerful framework for professionals, especially right now. In this age of AI, your value, it's not about learning more stuff. It's about becoming harder to replace. I mean, information is everywhere, right? Strategy can be generated in an instant. So how are you supposed to compete with that? Well, the answer is you don't. You become irreducible.
If your entire job boils down to gathering knowledge and then explaining it to someone else, you're in a race against an algorithm that you just cannot win. It's impossible. This is the core problem that this whole alpha ownership idea is built to solve. It's about a fundamental shift in how we even think about professional value. The rules of the game have completely changed. You see, in the old world, your value was proven through your hard work, your technical skill, your expertise. But today, that competence by itself is no longer a defense. In fact, showing too much effort can actually start to work against you. It becomes a liability. Okay, so let's really break down what this jurisdiction reset is all about. It marks this incredibly important transition, the move from being just a service provider, someone who has to constantly justify their price, to becoming what's called an alpha owner, who defends their value by taking custody of judgment itself. This really lays out that shift perfectly. On one side, you've got the old model, right? Value based on hours worked, technical skills. But on the other side, you have the new model, where value comes from observable behavior, your individual authority, and, get this, nervous system stabilization. That's so crucial, because if you can't demonstrate this new kind of value, you're just left competing on price, and that's a race to the bottom. And that brings us to the solution: tangible alpha. Now, this isn't a promise you make, it's not some fancy report, and it's definitely not another explanation. It is observable behavior. It's what you actually do when things get volatile and urgency is through the roof. It's that moment you stop defending your price with effort and start delivering real value by owning your judgment. If tangible alpha is the goal, how in the world do we build it? Well, you have to start with a foundation, the philosophical core of all real authority, and that's the foundational triad. Now, look closely. This isn't just some checklist of soft skills. It's a mathematical equation. Authority is competency times character times concern. Notice the multiplication signs. That's key. These things don't add up. If you've got high competency but no character, you're just a smart people pleaser. If you've got high character but no real concern for the client, you're just rigid. They are all absolutely essential. Which leads us to the zero multiplier rule. Think about it. If any one of these three pillars, competency, character, or concern, is missing, if it's a zero, what happens to the total? Your authority drops to zero. The whole structure just collapses. They are all completely non-negotiable. So let's get crystal clear on what these words really mean in this context. Competency isn't just about knowing stuff. It's about the integrity of your decisions when you're under pressure. Character isn't about being nice. It's about enforcing boundaries and refusing to lower your standards just to make someone comfortable. And concern isn't about being warm and fuzzy. It's about stewardship. It's having the guts to say no to protect a client from themselves. Where does this authority actually show up in the real world? Well, it lives in what the framework calls the 6 alpha domains. This is the tangible alpha taxonomy, basically a behavioral catalog of where your value is actually found. You should think of this as a map. If your authority isn't showing up in one of these 6 areas, it's probably what the source calls leaking, and we'll get back to that idea in a bit. The first 3 domains, they're all about taking what's called custody of the decision. So judgment means you narrow down choices. You don't just dump a bunch of options on someone. Sequencing means you control the order and the timing of everything. And behavioral regulation, well, that means you're the calm, stabilizing force in the room, especially when a crisis hits. Then you've got the next 3 domains, which are all about taking custody of the structure. Constraint design means that when a decision is made, it stays made. It's closed. Meaning translation is your ability to take something complex and make it simple and personally relevant. And time sovereignty means you control the calendar and the pace of things. Urgency from the outside gets filtered by you, not just absorbed. So we know what authority is, and we know where it lives, but how do we actually build it? Well, the core idea here is a total shift in thinking. It's about installation over education. This isn't about knowing more, it's about being different when the pressure is on. You can really see that shift here. We're moving away from pedagogy. That's the traditional school model of just accumulating knowledge. And we're moving toward andragogy, which is described here as the forge. A forge isn't a classroom.
It's problem-driven. It's about installing new behaviors. It's where professionals are made, not just taught.
And this happens through a very specific, repeatable process called the Alpha Install Protocol. It starts simply with a constraint on a cue card. Then comes a focused exercise you do alone. After that, the real-world test, pressure exposure. And finally, you have the RYG, red, yellow, green, trigger, which is where you check yourself and verify your own behavior after the pressure has passed.
Now, a system like this is just a bunch of nice ideas unless you can actually measure it. You have to know if your authority is holding firm or if it's starting to leak, and that's where the diagnostic tools come into play. This is the value map. It scores your authority with 3 simple questions. First, did my behavior stay stable under pressure? Second, did the client defer to me more? And third, and this is the big one, the real takeaway here, did that interaction leave me feeling drained or energized? That last one, advisor load, is the most important signal. If you're exhausted, your authority is leaking, period. It doesn't matter how happy the client says they are. Authority rarely collapses all at once. It erodes slowly. The framework calls this drift, and you've got to learn to spot the early warning signs. Things like explanation creep, where you find yourself using way too many words to justify a decision, or softening language, where you start watering down your directives just to avoid a little tension. If you ignore this drift, that's how you surrender your authority over time. And this all leads to the maintenance cycle, the infinite loop. You hold authority. Pressure hits, and eventually you detect some drift. But here's what's so crucial to understand. This isn't failure. Not at all. It's just a signal. A signal to use what's called the re-entry protocol. You spot the breach, you reset, and you get back to the forge. It's a process of constant reinforcement, without any shame attached. So after all this, what's the end goal? Where does this entire architecture lead you? It leads you to become the irreducible advisor. That professional whose value comes from actually installing authority, not just claiming it with a fancy title or a bunch of credentials. And here you can see the whole system stacked together. It all starts with the ontology. That's the triad we talked about. It gets expressed through the taxonomy of the 6 domains. It's measured by the diagnostic value map. It's built through execution in the forge, and it's maintained through the governance of that re-entry protocol. It really is a complete architecture for building real authority. And that brings us to the final, powerful truth of this entire framework. Authority is either installed or it is surrendered. There really is no middle ground. It's a conscious choice that every single professional has to make now. So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about. In a world where information is basically a free commodity, where does your true value really come from? Is it based on what you know, or is it based on what you can hold when the pressure is really on?